This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the show. All right, I have to admit, I'm on a kind of a weird schedule. It started with daylight savings, and then I was on the road for a little bit, and I still don't feel like I've settled back into a routine. And I'm not complaining, mind you. I'm just saying that normally I kind of have this routine where I get up really early and I get certain things done by a certain time of the day, and I'm just completely off from that schedule. So today's program is being published much, much later than it normally would be. So if your morning routine is, well, I get up and I listen to that Hyde kid hold forth on whatever while I'm exercising or whatever, I'm sorry. I've probably thrown you off on your routine as well, but I want you to know I do take this seriously. I'm not just, blowing it off because, I don't feel like it, man. I just want to chill. Although after looking at the sunrise this morning, it was very tempting to just kind of sit back and enjoy it. It was very fleeting. Right now, it's looking rather wintry out there. A lot of dirt. Leaves are off the trees. The fields. They're just not that green, verdant, agricultural wonderland that we had, for most of the year. But this time of year, even though the days are getting shorter, the sunrises and sunsets can really be something remarkable. So if you need a little pick-me-up, and if you're like me, I don't know about you, seasonal affective disorder, it gets me. When the days start getting shorter, I don't know how to describe it. I can't really put my finger on it, but the blues kick in. I feel it. I just have kind of a sense of melancholy, and if there's something weighing on me, it just kind of seems amplified. I know I'm not alone in this. In fact, I'm going to take a little detour here for just a moment, and without, I don't want to, I'm not mentioning any names or anything, but I am seeing firsthand a number of friends and even family members who are just struggling this year. And I don't know exactly what the cause is. I mean, it could be something to do with, seasonal affective disorder. It could be, in many cases, they have some pretty challenging circumstances, family strife and things like this that contribute to it. But here come the holidays, and it's very, very difficult. And I'm not telling you this to, garner sympathy. I'm doing okay. All right. I may be feeling a little blue from time to time, but I'm doing okay. But I'm very concerned because the kind of language that I'm hearing from some of these friends it's pretty bleak. Like they're experiencing despair. And you understand the difference between discouragement and despair. Discouragement is like, yeah, I'm bummed, or this is really weighing on me, or I'm upset, or I'm not happy, and I just can't shake it. I'm depressed. That's discouragement. Despair is something much, much deeper. And I don't think I fully understood this until I was listening to Ammon Bundy explain this at an event he was speaking at in Modesto, California a few years ago. And he talked about what he was going through as he waited in prison for the first of his 2 criminal trials at the hands of the federal government. And at that point, it was kind of a foregone conclusion. The FBI had swept in and rounded up Ammon and as many members of his family as they could, and anybody they could connect to either the occupation of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge or the standoff at Bunkerville, in which armed federal agents were backed down by armed citizens. And so it was a pretty fair bet that, oh boy, the feds are going to pull out everything they've got, and they're going to make sure that this guy and anybody associated with him isn't ever going to see the light of day again. And so there he sat, waiting for trial, but being treated very much as a convicted prisoner, in that he had no privacy, nothing. He was a piece of state property. But the thing that weighed most on his mind was that he was unable to see and hold and express his love to his family, to his children. And he said that was the greatest sorrow that he'd ever felt in his life. That was the thought that he might never again be able to be with his family and be with his children, just weighed on him like nothing else. And so he related how he prayed in his prison cell, kneeling there beside his prison bunk and just pouring his heart out to God. And he said, despair is not just I'm feeling bad or I'm feeling discouraged. He said, despair is that moment where you are really at the end, where you've reached the point where you just don't believe that you could take anymore. Now, that's going to mean different things for different people, but I think for most of us, that means you're actually contemplating, how can I bow out of this? How can I end this sorrow and this suffering that I'm feeling right now? And he talked about how as he prayed, he felt this incredible feeling of peace come over him. And I know that words don't really describe it. In fact, I'm hesitant to really give you a lot of detail on it just because it was really kind of a sacred experience for him. But the bottom line was that peace did come over him, and he said it pushed every bit of that despair right out of his being. He said it's like the peace just completely spread throughout his body, and he knew that at some point things were going to be okay. Now keep in mind, this would have been in early 2016. I'm guessing around maybe March or April, somewhere in there. It wasn't until October, the end of October of 2016, that he and the other defendants in the Malheur Wildlife Refuge were acquitted by a jury. And then, or maybe that was 2017. Forgive me. No, it was in 2017 that they were then facing the trial in Vegas. That's the one that I was able to attend. So almost a year later before he goes to trial in Vegas. But in the meantime, he's still very much a prisoner. But I remember Ammon telling a TV reporter who was interviewing him there at the Malheur, jail where he was being held. This reporter asked him, well, was it worth it? And his answer was yes. As hard as this has been, it was worth it. Now, this is after he had received that assurance, that blessing of comfort. And I remember him saying that one day we will be free. And when it happens, he says, everyone will understand that it was the Lord's hand that freed us. And the time he said this, I want you to know, I was like, wow, that's a bold thing to say, because none of that was apparent. Neither one of those trials had begun yet, and it really looked like, no, this is not looking good for him or anybody else involved in those trials. But I tell you this because it did happen. And there at the end of 2017, not only did the federal government's case fall apart, but early in 2018, the judge dismissed that case with prejudice, meaning it couldn't be brought back. And Ammon and his family were freed. Decisively freed. So I tell you this, first of all, to illustrate that, yes, despair is a very real thing, and I think this time of year especially, it's a very dangerous thing for those who are vulnerable. And I worry about some of these friends that I see, posting messages saying, this is it, I'm done. I don't want to live anymore. And I'm sharing this with you to ask you to please be extra aware. Take note of the people in your life. And you don't have to have all the answers. And I'm not a counselor. I'm not a spiritual leader or anything like that, but I will tell you what I am is I'm a friend. And to that end, when I see a friend who is, it looks like they may be, skating out onto the thin ice, I just make myself available. That's it. I have no solutions to offer, and I'll tell them right up front, I'm not going to be able to solve your problems. But if you want to talk to me, you will know, per that conversation, that you have someone who is on your side, who loves you, who's praying for you, and encouraging you to hang on. Now, I don't do this because I'm just that good of a guy. I do this because there were people in my life who have done that for me. There were times where things were very, very difficult, and I wouldn't say I was necessarily suicidal, but I was definitely kind of hitting the bottom as far as, wow, this is the hardest time I've lived through so far. And as difficult as those days might be, as you know, deep as the darkness might have felt, someone always stepped up and offered encouragement. And it came in different ways, okay? It wasn't, many of them didn't even really know what exactly I was going through. But something whispered to them and said, hey, could you check on this guy? Could you just put it out there that whatever else is happening, you believe in him? And it was enough. It was a lifeline that got me through to where I could, make it to safe ground. Okay, I feel a little bit awkward for having shared that. Okay, I feel a lot awkward for having shared that. But my heart tells me that was something that needed to be said. And if it's not you that needed to hear it, well, okay, let's move along. We'll move on from it. But if it's something you needed to hear, whether you have someone in your life who is really struggling right now and you're just wondering how you can help them, okay, be available for them. And likewise, if you are my friend, and I believe my circle of listeners is small enough that the chances are, we probably know each other personally, know that I'm available. And I may not be able to solve your problems, but I will definitely be there for you. So, for what it's worth, there we go. All right. I do have a couple things I wanted to share with you. I'm going to start with this article from Barry Brownstein. I don't really see any problems this year as far as, getting with family is going to be awkward. This was a hard-fought election year, and political division is everywhere. I get it for some people. There are people who've been actively cutting off family members, and it could be very awkward for some people, but it doesn't have to be. And Barry Brownstein actually shares 5 ways to not let politics ruin Thanksgiving. And these are so good that I really think that it's worth sharing with you. I'm including it in my show notes at thebryanhydeshow.com. These are show notes for November 22nd, 2024. Barry says political divisions are ugly, and those divisions have spilled over onto our Thanksgiving table. And one study found that the partisan differences cost American families 62 million person-hours of Thanksgiving time. That's staggering. And presumably those same differences are impacting the quality of family time throughout the year. So time to count our blessings has become another opportunity to count our grievances. So he offers 5 suggestions here to help bring harmony to your Thanksgiving table. Number 1, begin with your purpose in mind. Now, what he's saying here is when our purpose at the dinner table is clouded by wishes to feel superior to a relative who just doesn't get it, we're setting ourselves up for an unhappy Thanksgiving. If our attention is directed by our purpose, then our mind is going to jump on every shred of evidence to confirm that our relative is the problem, or that we have to flex on them and, show that we're superior. He says, by allowing our mind to gnaw on irritations and grievances, we have made harmony dependent upon others behaving as we think they should. Notice as details of complaints fill our minds, we suffer more. So instead, we can lead by going first. We can find our higher purpose for this year's Thanksgiving gathering. And as we take our attention off disagreements with others, we can watch the quality of the conversation change. That seems doable, right? That seems pretty simple. Number 2, he says, ask yourself, would I rather be right or be happy? Barry says, is it important to have an opinion about everything? How often do we look for a pause in the conversation so we can tell others why they're wrong? And when we express an opinion that doesn't need to be expressed, what we're saying to the other person is, my function is to correct you, and your function is to accept my correction. So should we be surprised if others resist us? He has a great quote here from Ryan Holiday, author of several books on Stoicism, writing of the price that we pay for our opinions. Ryan Holiday says, if you were to think of the worst punishment you can inflict on a person, it would be to cast a spell on them that says you will now have a strong opinion on everything you see and hear. Why? Because inevitably they find that much of what happens to them is disagreeable to that opinion. And worse, they'll find themselves in many pointless disagreements with other people about those opinions. So there you have it. There's a good warning. Don't be that person. And here's the good news. Barry says we can be grateful for our opinionated relatives because they provide us with an opportunity to practice not having to always be right. We can choose instead to be curious about the opinions of others. Number 3, he says, practice Ben Franklin's humility rule. In his autobiography, Ben Franklin writes of learning of a flaw in his own character revealed to him by a friend, saying, I was generally thought proud that my pride showed itself frequently in conversation, that I was not content with being in the right when discussing any point, but was overbearing and rather insolent. So Ben Franklin realized he was lacking humility. And despite practice, he says, I could not boast of much success in accepting the reality of this virtue. So he added a rule to his life and said, I made it a rule to forbear all direct contradiction to the sentiments of others and all positive assertion of my own. I even forbid myself the use of every word or expression in the language that imported a fixed opinion, such as certainly, undoubtedly, etc. And I adopted instead of them, I conceive, I apprehend, or I imagine a thing to be so, or so it appears to me at present. Do you see the difference? I'll tell you another way to say that may sound a little more like common English is, to my understanding, or as I best understand it, because that leaves things open to maybe I don't have all the answers. Franklin says he noticed how contradicting others gave him pleasure. When another asserted something that I thought to be an error, I denied myself the pleasure of contradicting him abruptly and of showing immediately some absurdity in his proposition. So Barry Brownstein's point is, this Thanksgiving we can deny ourselves or practice denying ourselves the pleasure of contradicting others. By the way, this would be a great place for that meme of the neckbeard dude actually, trying to correct everybody who's wrong on the internet. Number 4, understand the nature of feelings. Barry Brownstein says, we believe that the intensity of our feelings is a signal that we are right and others are wrong. Upset feelings are a guide to the quality of our thinking, not the correctness of our position. So when we experience intense emotions, we commonly attribute our emotions to what is external. We're certain that obnoxious Uncle Joe has caused our discomfort by expressing his flawed opinions. Full stop, says Barry. Being irritated, being annoyed, being angry are pre-existing qualities in us, and they're not caused by Uncle Joe. Our reaction to Uncle Joe reveals to us a flaw in our own character. So instead of irritation, we can cultivate gratitude by remembering how the sacrifices of the family members sitting at our table have improved our lives. By the way, if you're like me and you look around every so often and realize there's a lot of family members that aren't sitting around that table anymore, you really start to realize that maybe being right is of lesser importance than being grateful for the time we get to spend with those loved ones. Number 5, he suggests, reflect on our shared human experience. Viktor Frankl, the famed psychiatrist and author of Man's Search for Meaning, also wrote The Will to Meaning. In it, he describes a tragic triad of human experiences. He observed there is no human being who may say that he has not failed, that he does not suffer, and that he will not die. So before a cosmic moment has gone by, everyone at our Thanksgiving tables will experience Frankl's tragic triad. We can look at the faces around the table and let our hearts melt with the truth of our common journey. When we focus on what we share rather than on what divides us, love comes to the forefront of our experience. Isn't that some solid advice? Yeah. Anyway, Barry always delivers. I would really recommend check out the link that I provide in the show notes. And if you are so inclined, go to his Substack and subscribe, because you'll find he is a ready source of great information and food for thought that is really nourishing. Okay, now, having said that, one last article I'm going to point you toward. This is 9 thought-provoking quotes on communism and religion from an ex-Soviet spy. Maybe you've heard of Whittaker Chambers. Well, Rebekah Bills, writing for intellectualtakeout.org, has a wonderful piece on Chambers, who made kind of an interesting journey. I mean, he became an actual communist, but then he changed his thinking and became one of the strongest advocates against communism. And if you want to understand his journey and what it was that motivated him to change his mind, these quotes are a very, very solid place to start. So, again, this is published on intellectualtakeout.org. I will include a link in my show notes at thebryanhydeshow.com, so hopefully you can check that one out for yourself. Now, I have to warn you that next week I'm going to be filling in for my friend Bill Cawley, who does the morning show on KLIX Radio in Twin Falls, Idaho. And if you're so interested, News Radio 1310, I believe is their website. You can check it out. It'll be streaming. I'll be having some fun there, actually talking to callers and so forth. But I very likely will not be getting this program out on a daily basis. I'm not proclaiming my laziness so much as just telling you I won't have as much time to work with in the day. So this is one of the things that you may or may not see a lot of episodes coming from me next week. Plus, we have the Thanksgiving holiday, and I'll probably be in a turkey coma at some level and trying to work my way through that. Anyway, if I don't talk to you before then, have a happy Thanksgiving. Again, check out my show notes at thebryanhydeshow.com.
This is The Bryan Hyde Show.